that mean 6? All right, everybody. I think we can just get started. So thank you very much for being here again on this chilly Monday night. I'm glad that you are all, or I hope you are all at home right now, because that's probably where you're most comfortable and most warm. So the office is a touch cool at the moment, but they just turned it back on for me because it automatically, the things start to cool off around 4:30, but it's funny, most of us are here far past that, and you don't even notice until the temperatures are like what they are at the moment. So let's just get it all started, everybody. Thank you for being here. It is February 15th. Most of our group can be here tonight. I've only heard from a couple who aren't able to be here. So once again, thank you. And we know what our goals are. The group has been really amazing in offering feedback and input that is very much aligned with the goals as we originally outlined them. And of course, we're doing so. Everything is still within, the parameters of our 5 values, and then the other factors that we have elevated to such a high status during the pandemic, such as health and safety, flexibility and adaptability, mental health, and high quality instruction. And then we know that our purpose is to get our kids back to school safely and keep them in school safely. And guess what? This is the first meeting where we are all together, and all of our grades have a hybrid form of instruction. So everybody who wants to be in school has a schedule that puts them in school half-time, physically in school. You can also see here that the data within the district right now looks very good. As far as positive staff or student cases at school, you see by the use of the asterisk that it means that it is less than 5. Positive student cases in co-curriculars is actually at 0, which is wonderful. 29 of our students are in quarantine, and our staff less than 5. So the data within the district right now, as far as students who are positive or need to be quarantined, or staff positive or need to be quarantined, is really good. So our agenda for this evening, we'll start once again just by asking if anyone in the group has any informational updates to share. There are really important pieces that seem to be coming out on a daily basis. Just review what we did on February 1st as just a refresher, so that everybody's on the same memory page. You know exactly what it was that we did 2 weeks ago. Share just tiny updates from Public Health Emergency Order number 13 and the recent CDC school guidance. Then we will seek input and feedback on week 1 of grades 7 through 12, and we have some administrators from those levels here with us tonight to give you some boots on the ground input. And then we will seek input and feedback based on the preliminary results of the informative interviews that we've been discussing. They've been conducted primarily for people who are in Oregon online, but we are starting to move into the same conversations for those who selected phased restart. And then talk a little bit about the next meeting. So before we move forward, I'm just wondering, does anybody in the group have any updates or information based on their professional experiences that they think would be helpful for the group to hear? Dr. Tempe, I heard you were in a really great panel discussion that quite a few of my colleagues were able to see. That was last week, was it not?
I'm trying to think. There have been a few, but so we've been keeping busy with things like that. But yes, we did one for Dane County on vaccine issues. So
I think that was the one. Yeah.
And I think the only update I have along that line is phase 1B, which includes instructional staff from childcare through secondary. So all K-12 probably won't be starting until after March 1st and might be delayed even longer after that. We're still having, Wisconsin's doing a good job of getting vaccine out, but there are still supply issues.
That is exactly what we have heard also. The really great news is that all of our staff members who are qualified under Tier 1A have all received their vaccination now. So that's really positive. Anybody else have anything that they think would be helpful information?
Actually, just have a question for Dr. Turpe. Sorry to put you on the spot on this. I'm wondering about the next phase, the phase 1B. There's a mention to some public-facing essential workers. I'm wondering if there's any further detail that can be provided on that.
Yeah, it actually is a great number of individuals that I could bring up a sheet here that I have, but real quickly, it's an awful lot of individuals, including utility, public transportation is included there. Wastewater. Hang on, let me bring this up because my memory is not serving me.
I will stop sharing. If you'd like to share something on your computer, would you like to do that?
Well, I have to find this first, so give me
a moment to find it. Does anybody else have anything to share, or perhaps a question to ask that someone in the group might be able to answer?
I can just share, I'll put it in the chat, but there are some grants coming out of DHS that folks might be interested in terms of getting vaccination out, particularly to marginalized populations.
Wow, thank you.
Okay, Brian, I can be a little bit more transparent here with 1B. So it's 9/11 operators, utility employees, education, childcare, public transit, food chain. So that's a large group that includes production and grocery, non-frontline healthcare personnel at about 25,000. And this group also, I just chuckle because it's the one that we get a lot of flack over, but it's people involved in mink husbandry. And this is a biosecurity issue. Mink actually can contract very easily SARS from humans. It can go through I was going to say herd, but it's not a herd. It's a barn, basically, with mink, and rapidly mutate, and then it can be transmitted back into people. And in Denmark, that got to be an issue with variant strains being transmitted back into humans with weird configurations. And so by immunizing 300 people in Wisconsin, we wanted to try and put an end to that. So those are the groups. And then with phase 1B, just so people, or 1C, that would be the next, our subcommittee has been suspended for the time being because we don't really even know when we're going to come back to be able to address that. There's just so many people out there right now between 1A, age 65 and older, and then 1B that we're probably going to be getting into late spring before we can start addressing any other groups.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Dr. Tempty, does the Johnson & Johnson vaccine coming into use help with the supply at all? Uh-oh, I think you might be muted.
I think I am muted. We hope so. Mm-hmm. Reportedly, there's about 100 million doses available in the U.S. There should be authorization for the vaccine by the end of next week, we believe. And thereafter, there should be approval by CDC. So it'll start flowing. And then the question is there really 100 million doses? But that vaccine is going to be nice because it's a single dose and it is refrigerator stable. So
Wow.
we look forward to that coming aboard.
I just have a quick question. Dr. Tempty, I have yet to run into somebody who has had a Pfizer vaccine. Is it primarily healthcare people who are getting that because of the storage conditions and that can be maintained at the hospitals, or what?
Well, yeah, long and short, it was the first vaccine available. It had the extreme cold chain. So there were only about, 16 to 20 freezers that had that capacity in Wisconsin, most affiliated with healthcare settings. And it came out at the time that the first tier, A1A, was healthcare people involved in frontline patient care. So that's why myself and Joanne both received this, because that's what was available.
Got it. All right, thank you. It's just a curiosity question.
All right. Anyone else? And thank you for that information, Dr. Tempty. That's really helpful. All right, then I'm going to summarize our February 1st meeting. We shared the Panther Pledge as an outcome of the prior meeting and spoke about all the different ways that we were communicating the importance of the pledge to our school community. That included email, social media. Everyone has received a physical copy along with a sticker both in English and in Spanish reminding people to take the pledge. Lots of different ways that this information has gone home. And then on February 1st, we also received input from you on the return of students in grades 3 through 6 to in-person learning. And you heard a presentation from Rome Corners as an example of how that transition was moving along, and with an emphasis on what we were doing to support students in the transition, because that's been something that the medical working group has discussed quite frequently. And then, since we last met, we also had Public Health Emergency Order number 13. So how that impacted us as far as the actual functioning of the learning environment, it didn't have a significant impact. However, it did impact what we were able to do related to athletics. As you know, the indoor gathering limit is 25 without food, 50 with, and outdoor is 100 and 150 with those, that caveat and that too. And then the changes to the sports guidance were pretty significant because it removed the medium, high risk, and low risk sports designations and just basically said that athletes should maintain 6 feet of distance when not actively participating in the sport, and allowed students to pod in groups of up to 25 indoors. So what that meant is that our students were able to actually run a practice. It didn't solve every logistical issue, but it made it so that students were able to actually practice their athletic, their sport. So that will definitely help as we move forward, because believe it or not, we're actually moving into the fall sports season right now. The transition is happening through February and March, and this particular order goes through March 10th. And then on Friday, the CDC released their guidance related to schools. And there was some interesting information on that too. Nothing that was really shocking. As a matter of fact, many of us thought that the CDC might say something related to less physical distance for younger students. And instead they They really emphasize the importance of 6 feet. And here's an example of one of the drawings in a classroom that they showed the desks 6 feet apart from every angle. It's funny because it actually looks like one of our classrooms, minus the fans in the window because we have excellent ventilation systems. And so that isn't a necessary feature. But you see the hand sanitizer in multiple places and the desks spaced apart, etc. It looks like one of our, for example, 3rd grade classrooms. They did divide some recommendations up related to transmission within the community. I checked with Rachel Goldberg, our representative in Public Health Madison-Dane County, and asked her if she could let me know which zone we were in, because when we looked it up, it looked like we were in the high transmission zone, and we were surprised by that. And sure enough, that's where our numbers continue to put us. It's interesting, and you can see here that in the high transmission zone, middle school and high schools are virtual only, unless they can strictly implement all the mitigation strategies, which thankfully we can. And then it also puts it in as 6 feet or more is required, as opposed to the idea of 6 feet to the greatest extent possible. So what I've been told is that DHS needs to review and decide on whether they're adopting any of it, and then public health adopts after DHS. So it was really, I would say, heartening to look at the 5 key mitigation strategies and know that we are already doing them and doing them very well. And so we feel very confident with what we're doing related to the strategies that keep our environments safe for our kids. And so taking the next steps is really what's more on our mind. And I thought I saw something. No? Okay. And then we'll move into the first thing that we want to talk to you about. And this is where I think Drew will do a little introduction for us.
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. Yeah, very briefly, just to orient you to the process tonight. As always, Leslie, Tim and Krista from your board and I met and debriefed past meetings, plan next one, etc. And as Leslie said, there's 2 questions, and you can see them there, that we'll be focusing on. Leslie and members of the staff will do an overview of each one of these, and then we'll stay in the large group format and invite everyone to share reactions, questions, suggestions. Again, wearing your expertise that you have and are the reasons you're part of this committee. So we're interested in your perspectives on these 2 topics, and each one would be prefaced with some information. So, and we've allocated equal amounts of time for this, and I'll make sure everyone has a chance to share their thoughts and feedback on it. So that is basically what we're going to do tonight. So real quickly, I'll just go back to Leslie, and she'll facilitate the conversation on the 7 to 12 return and give you a chance to give you some comments.
Thank you. So first I'll just talk about it in pretty general terms. And then tonight we have Jim Pliner, the high school principal, is here with us to share his impressions, because clearly he's in the building with the kids and he'll definitely be able to give you more details. And then from the middle school, we have associate principal Jason Zerwick and administrative intern Katie Anderson, who are also here to share a little bit about what they're seeing with our middle school students as they have phased into in-person. So you can see from the pictures what the classrooms actually look like, and even the music, and the students so carefully spaced with enough room away from one another. And then on the side where you have many students sitting facing forward with their Chromebooks, that is an example of a middle school classroom and what that looks like at the moment. So they're in, and it was pretty exciting. And due to the tours and the information that was sent out and all of the people who are on hand, I would say it started with very smoothly. Really no confusion on the part of the students. I was at the middle school on the very first day, and students had to go into the door that was assigned based on where their first hour classroom was. And students just did an amazing job figuring out where to go and what to do. And there was an adult probably every 10 feet to make sure that they knew where they were going and what they were doing, and to remind them to keep safe distance. So really, most of the questions that we tend to receive, and we won't go into great detail in this group because I know this group's expertise is more around the safety strategies. But one of the questions that we receive quite frequently is, why did we choose the model that we chose? Because it is slightly different. If you look at various school districts in the area, it's probably most in line with what Wanakee is doing, but it's slightly different from most of our other companion or colleague school districts that are in session. Most of them in Dane County are not yet, but will be over the course of the next month. So, as you know, just to give you a little bit of background, we decided early on that whether or not a student was in Oregon Online or in phased restart, they would be taught by Oregon teachers. So we weren't purchasing seats in a program and putting all of our online students in this pre-purchased program. Everything is coming from our Oregon teachers. We thought that helped with the connection that we knew was really important. We also are designing lessons specifically for the teaching mode, whether that's in person or online. They are not interchangeable. They require very different strategies. And so we can't assume that just because something can be done in person that we can also do it that exact way online. Oftentimes it must be different. And so the teachers are teaching both. And that's an important piece to note. And then we also wanted to pick the model that was the most responsive to the needs of the individual. For example, a lot of schools are doing live streaming. So if you're in the online program, you watch what's happening in the in-person classroom, and the teacher teaches to both groups simultaneously. And while there's certainly advantages to that, and we would never completely rule it out, what we did find was that it was extraordinarily challenging to teach to both groups at once. And what was observed when we were able to visit schools who were doing it was it meant that some groups just sat there while the teacher talked to the other group, and vice versa. So it led to, possibly less engaging situation when the teacher had to divide his or her attention in two. So how did we figure this out? We went to dedicated online teachers for K-6. So we have, you're either teaching in person or you are teaching online. But in 712, we chose flipped. And that was particularly influential this past week because that's when we got to really experience what it was going to be like to have the students who were in front of you in person, but they were also doing lessons online. And then you were also having small groups with your online only students in the afternoons. So the teachers' schedules are pretty full, managing all of it. But we felt that it meant that students were getting individual small, either individual or small group attention frequently. So what are some of the key safety strategies? Well, the requirements of the Panther Pledge, we've made a really, really big deal of this. And so you should not be able to find a high school student who has no idea what that means. We required the 2-ply mask, and our students are doing a fantastic job with that. They're used to it now. I'm sure that they've had to do it in other parts of their life. So we haven't had significant issues related to that. 6 feet of distancing, so the classrooms are set up so that students are safely spaced. For the older students, the hallways are challenging. I think what I've been told is that students are doing quite well, but it's still challenging. We're cleaning the high touch areas between classes. So, for example, at the middle school, there are some desks that have orange tape on them and some that have white on them. So, if you come in first hour, I'm just making it up as an example, you sit at the orange tape desk. Second hour would sit at the white taped. And then at the end of those 2 hours is when the teacher sprays off the desks. That way, it doesn't have to happen after every single class, but the students are always sitting down to a desk that has been cleaned and no one else has sat in it. We have entry and exits designated around the buildings so that students are not streaming in just from one exit. We have still have bus supervisors on most buses, and I would say that we're prioritizing the buses with the younger students when we need to prioritize the supervisors. And there's also no locker use, which is really inconvenient in a lot of ways, but lockers are where our students would be bunched up with one another, and that's certainly what we're trying to avoid. So now I'm just going to go back to the pictures and use that as the backdrop, and then invite our high school and our middle school administrators who are here to share some of their observations from week 1, specific to safety, but generally how the students are doing also, because we know safety isn't just physical, it's also social emotional.
Hello, thanks for having me. This is Jim Pleiner, and I'm speaking on behalf of the high school. And what I can tell you in our first week is how wonderful, first of all, it was to have kids back in our building. The best week in the past 11 months this last week for me and almost every single one of my colleagues. And so we will start by saying that, number one, that was undeniable. The energy in our building was super positive and it was great. I talked before coming tonight with my administrative team, and I said, have you guys gotten a single complaint from any staff member about like protocols that weren't working or things that haven't been followed? And not one. And so what that means is, number one, the team has worked so hard to not only identify, but what the protocols are, but that they're working and that our staff is seeing that our kids are following it. Believe me, if that wasn't the case, we would hear about it. So that is really, I think, a very strong positive. I know that, my teachers have been killing it. And, I don't want to oversell and be incredibly positive here, but our teachers have been working incredibly hard to make this work. And they're really, they're exhausted, but are committed to making this work at a high level. The kids have been very positive about it, and I have not had to speak to a student about not falling in line or not doing what they're expected to do. As Leslie said, we've been trying to publicize ahead of time as much as we can and to acclimate our new students to the building. And I've been on the PA bunches of times in the first few days just to remind kids. But outside of that, it's been absolutely seamless and really, really positive.
Thanks, Jim. Jason or Katie from the middle school, would you like to add any observations for the group?
Yeah, I would just echo what Jim said. I think the 8th was really emotional for our staff, just having the kids come back in. And I know it started about a week or so earlier when we had our tours. We had about 160 families come in on Wednesday to do some, whether it was guided tours or self-guided tours. And I think that set the stage. I would actually go back to that last week of January where in our connections, all of our students had specific lessons on the safety procedures and safety expectations. So along with students being able to see the lessons, majority of I should say over half of our incoming students were able to do the building tours. So they were actually able to not only see it ahead of time, but then walk the buildings, seeing all the safety procedures, the tape down, the one-way arrows, the dots for social distancing, what a classroom looks like, what it looks like to enter a classroom, what it looks like to exit a classroom. All those pieces really, really helped out a smooth transition on February 8th when we had our first group of students. And we're having about 225-ish students per day when they're coming in. So that's about 35% of our population. And, you know, it's a team. Our teachers, like Jim said, have been fantastic with going with the flow and knowing that we are constantly evaluating, revising, being flexible. You know, I've never been a tremendously flexible individual because my hamstrings are always tight. I feel like I'm as flexible as I can be because we work with such a great team. So I think it's been really a positive start. You know, the first 4 days with students. Students are generally following the expectations. I think the one thing that we're continuing to find ways to continue reteaching and having staff out in between passing times. I think that's our biggest thing that we're still trying to work through. But when kids go in the classroom, they're wearing their masks, they're sitting where they need to, like Dr. Bergstrom said, as far as sitting on what side of the desks, using the restroom, specifically filling up water bottles at the water station. So all those different things that we taught students, exiting building, entering the building, all those different pieces have been instrumental in the success that we've had so far. And as I shared earlier, you know, we're a team of over 100 staff members at the middle school, and the observations and feedback that we get from our teammates, we try to implement and evaluate if it's going to be a safer way to have students being in the building. For an example, we had 4 designated doors that students would come in as well as they'd leave the building. And over the course of the first 2 days, a couple staff members recommended, well, what if I took our group of students out this door? I know that's not one of the designated doors, but we'll make sure we're following the procedures to make it safe. So we went from 4 doors to 6 doors, which when you're trying to get 225 students out of the building in the matter of a few minutes, it really made a difference. So I just say it's been a great experience thus far. I think the other part that has made it so successful is we shared all of our teaching tools that we use with the students the last week of January with all the families, so that they were able to see it ahead of time and have any necessary conversations with their learners. So I think that whole component of school and home has really been a tremendous asset to the success. Katie, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add.
No, I would just reiterate all of that. You know, I think that all the pre-teaching on the safety and the Panther Pledge really has helped make this a really smooth transition. I know that week before there was a lot of anxiety for both students and staff. And I think once kids got in the building, just their excitement and the staff excitement, kind of that anxiety just went away. And it was a really positive thing. And it's been really nice. You know, middle school kids aren't typical to say, yeah, I was so excited to come to school. And that's the norm right now. They miss it. They want to be there. They're willing to follow those safety guidelines so that we can stay in the building and they can keep coming in. And so it's been just a really positive, it was fun. It felt like being in a school, and, you know, it's the reason I got into education to begin with. And so it finally felt some normalcy instead of a very quiet, cold building that I had been working in for the last 11 months. So, yep, all positives.
Very good.
And I could reaffirm, I have a 7th grader and he doesn't really get excited about school or say anything positive. But the first day that he came home, he goes, Dad, that was really, really a good day. It was great to be back. So again, I think this is a testament to all the work that, you know, the middle school staff as well as all the buildings are doing for their kids.
Thanks, Jason. All right. So now you know a little bit about what it's been like thus far, some of the strategies that we have in place. And every time we ask the group to give feedback or input, people say really amazing things that help us get better. So no pressure on you. You don't have to say anything amazing, but we're definitely interested in your input. So I'll hand it back to Drew.
Yeah, so as Leslie just said, this could be some question or a topic you don't have any specific opinions on, and if that's the case, just say pass. But if you've got a suggestion or a reaction or a specific question, we'd love to hear from you. So we've got about 15 minutes to get all the voices on the table for this. Who would like to start us off?
I have a question, sort of following up from a discussion I had with Dr. Bergstrom last week regarding the it's an interesting question regarding the desks.
Mm-hmm.
AC, it showed 6 feet of physical distance in between the desks. Is that what we do, or is it 6 feet from chair to chair?
Mm-hmm. I would say that I'll defer to Jason and Katie because they've actually set the rooms up, but we're making sure there's 6 feet between the students, but usually desks.
Yeah, Joanne, we're typically going from the back. Let's say if you're in row 2, you're going to be 6 feet away from the back of the student in front of you.
So it's 6 feet from chair to chair, from student to student.
Yes.
Okay. So this is just my thought and suggestion if it's doable based on.
Joanna, we lost you, Joanna.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand there was one kid on the first day back who tested positive, and we knew about it in our house immediately because it happened to be a friend of my daughter's, and the child told everybody she was around. And so then I started questioning my daughter, okay, what happened? And at least what came out is that at least for periods of time, it sounds like less than 15 minutes, but the kids were excited to see each other and they were leaning in toward each other. And I'm thinking about my daughter's very long torso and going, okay, if they're 6 feet chair to chair and they start leaning toward each other, they're breaking the 6 feet barrier. And so what I just saw, if it's possible in the rooms, what I saw from what the CDC has set up, that 6 feet of actual distance in between the desks themselves creates a buffer zone. That so if the kids start leaning toward, and Caitlin did note that the child in question at one point leaned back to talk to the other kids. And it sounds like none of it was long enough for 15 minutes, but it still got me thinking, especially with that diagram, if the desk can be 6 feet in between each desk, that creates a buffer zone. So if the kids do lean toward each other because they miss each other, you're still not breaking the 6 feet. It sounds like everything, in this case, everything's fine. Caitlin's been fine. I just asked her about the other friend that was close. That friend is fine. But just sort of this near miss freak out amongst the kids got me thinking, do we have a buffer zone? And if we have the space, it might be reasonable to create a buffer zone. And it looks like the way the CDC has it set up, they actually have a buffer zone built in. We might want to consider it if we have the space.
Okay, good, great. Thank you for that suggestion. Good. Brian, let's go to you, and then Evan, you're on deck.
Sure. So I've got 2 questions actually. My first one is, and it sounds like this was already done, but I just want to get this clarified. CDC obviously just came out with new recommendations just a few days ago, and you guys have been working with your protocols. Has a gap analysis been performed between the new recommendations and your protocols to identify any possible gaps?
There hasn't been one that's done as a group. I know I've certainly done one on my own, and we'll expand that. And I know that's what Public Health is also doing this week too, is they're taking time to take a look at it, compare it to their recommendations, and they'll get something to us by the end of the week. But no, when I read through the document, there's nothing in there that isn't in line with what we're already doing, thankfully.
Excellent. And my second question, and forgive me, I think Jim, you had mentioned that we're at about 1/3 capacity compared to where the normal student flow is. And it sounds like everything's going pretty well for the first week. Maybe some struggles with in between passing periods. How scalable do you feel, or any of the teachers feel that this is for capacity wise as you move forward? At some point, I'd imagine you're going to run into a problem with getting students in and out or passing periods. I remember high school and I felt like I was in a sardine can most of the time. So I'm wondering, just from your experience, how you feel the scalability is.
So in maintaining 6 feet, if we're going to stay at that 6 feet of recommendation, that really reduces the density capacity within any given traditional sized classroom to roughly 15. And, you know, as it turns out with our cohorts, our largest cohort sits at about 450. And depending on what classrooms I'm walking into, we have some classrooms that are pretty close to 15 or sitting at 15, and others that are smaller. We did have a classroom that had 17, just kind of the way that the comprehensive high school shuffles the deck, where we actually had to move a few students to a different period of that same teacher's teaching schedule because we did not feel that we could maintain 6 feet with 17 students in that room. So when we talk about scalability, if we're looking to increase the amount of students that would be in the building, it would be difficult for us to keep 6 feet if we significantly increase our population.
And I'd say the middle school is very similar. Our team classes, such as like a math class, social studies, science, and language arts, those classrooms are all pretty standard in size, minus the science classrooms are a little bit bigger. But majority of those classrooms, depending on furniture, are probably somewhere in that 13 to 15 desk range. And not all of our teachers or classrooms have the same furniture. So I think a lot of our classrooms right now, from a spatial standpoint, are getting pretty tight if we're trying to maintain that 6 foot distance.
Okay. Thank you, Jason and Jim. Good. Evan, and then Shelley, let's go to you after that.
I have nothing. I'll pass.
Okay. Shelley, and then we'll go to Beatrice.
I just have questions and you may not all have the answers. So I'm just going to rattle a few off. So great to hear all the positive news. I just wanted to check in to see how we might be finding out about concerns. And I know sometimes teachers, staff, bus drivers may have concerns about retaliation. So just wondering if there's anonymous ways to provide feedback so folks feel safe in giving their kind of honest feelings. I heard you say, Jim, I think that the teachers are exhausted, and I believe that. So just also, again, like kind of leaning back to the community, what are ways we can support you all and support our teachers, and would love to hear more about that. And then I think this group has really elevated lots of concerns around mental health and some of those things that go beyond curriculum, right? So how are we doing on feeding our kids healthy foods and all of that kind of stuff, and getting all of those things that we know schools play such an important role in. So just wanting to check in and hear more about that. And then finally, I just learned today our partners at Healthy Kids Collaborative, where I know Amy Miller is a strong partner, have a community health needs assessment for schools. And so I was just kind of scanning over that. So just wanting to make sure folks knew of that as a potential resource and way to kind of frame up some of the work. But awesome, so awesome to hear all of the great things happening.
Just to give you a little bit of information, the food delivery hasn't changed. So thankfully, we're continuing to do the 1,000 meals, 1,000 breakfast, 1,000 lunch delivery component. And then we've also had some grab and go options for the students who are leaving, so that they have that option too. So the food has stayed steady. And I know that Friends of Oregon School District are planning another support measure for the spring too. Anonymous feedback, that would be, I'm just thinking, you guys, basically through survey is probably where we'd have that opportunity. And we were not planning on doing that yet. We were going to wait a few weeks to do it for our students so they could get a feel of what it's like before we started asking them too many questions about it. But I don't know if Jim or Jason, I don't think we have an anonymous feedback opportunity. I've never thought that the staff were shy about feedback, but.
No, we do. We work with a leadership and department chair structure pretty closely too, to establish good two-way communication. And I think it's pretty open. But I would certainly, if there was another way to gather, if there was any evidence that people didn't feel comfortable with sharing those concerns, we would certainly be open.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing as Jim did. Our leadership team, our PBIS team, our OEA representatives, all of them are very communicative. If it's not something that's directly coming into, we have a frequently asked questions document that's populated multiple times a day by staff as far as questions or concerns that come up that administration will respond back to, as well as if someone doesn't want to put it in there, they can go to their various leadership teams. I think from a student standpoint, our connections was kind of formulated this year to really hone in that social and emotional learning component. And our connection teachers just have the ability to have some of those conversations with their students. The connections is probably right around 15 students, so it's a smaller group. So feedback, concerns, any of those pieces are coming to our connections teachers, and then that comes to the various leadership teams. So we don't have anything formal like a survey yet, or I'm not sure if we're going to do one, but I think we have many modes that we're gathering that feedback from.
Great.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you. Beatrice, and then we'll go to Raven.
Yeah. I just have a reaction to share. Just being out at the clinic, I've been seeing some teenagers coming to, just for their general checkups and whatnot. And now that they're back at school, I feel like there's a lot of positive feedback and kids saying that they're happy to be back. And so I think all in all, I think we're doing good.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Raven, and then to Jill.
I don't have anything to add, so I'll pass. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Raven. Jill, and then we'll go to Eric.
Hi. I'm not going to take credit for this idea. This came from some teenagers that I know, and I think it would only be feasible for the older grades. And maybe this is directed towards Dr. Tempty, if this would be, if this would help us with anything. But I heard some kids talking about how they don't have any problems wearing masks. That is not a problem at all. But they're bothered by the physical distance because they can't hear each other very well, like in the classroom, and the masks are muting them. And they said we would wear double, triple masks if that meant that we could sit closer to each other so we could hear each other better and kind of have a little bit better of the community. So I don't know if there's any research about double masking. And again, I think this would only be possible for older kids. I can't imagine littler kids being able to do this. But I thought it was an interesting question, and so I wanted to put it out there.
Good one.
Yeah, John or Joanna, do you need
As
quick
the deaf
responses to
person
that?
here, just speaking more out of personal experience.
Can't hear you, Joanna.
I don't know. Just
Okay.
it helps. Or
Sorry, it's still breaking up.
It sounds like you have a poor connection to your microphone onto the computer.
sorry.
Okay. Yeah, very quickly.
I'll put it back in to listen. Okay. One of the things that might help for teachers is if they have a microphone with audio so the students can hear them. That might be one option that the teachers can use. That way the kids can hear the teachers. So having amplification always helps. Number one. Number two, encouraging the children to speak up and enunciate. because at least in the office, and I'm in nice, quiet exam rooms, the people I have the hardest time hearing are the teenagers. They mumble, and the masks do not help.
Right.
So this is a perfect time and example to just like, okay, let everyone, and then
Got it.
I mean, but at least from the teacher standpoint, so kids are not missing anything, maybe consider microphones with amplifiers if we can, if that's possible. See what audiovisual and technology has for the middle school and the high school.
Thank you.
Okay. Good. Thank you. John, anything to add?
Yeah, that covers it very well. And I would just also agree that we all have to deal with this. And this is kind of the bane when I'm in clinic. It's sometimes very hard to hear people. So this is the first I've heard discussion of this, but I think this is a really important topic out there, particularly if we're going to be going on for several more weeks to months with masking.
All right. Good. While we're on you, John, do you have any other reactions, considerations, or questions you'd like to offer?
Yeah, I just had a question, and this goes to Leslie because we chatted just a little bit about aspects of testing. And there is a component in the CDC guidance, kind of an optional situation. But one of the questions I have is that of any interest to Oregon School District?
Well, we do have an opportunity to connect with a group through the UW that are doing the rapid antigen tests. But it just really depends. I think it has to be matched well with the circumstance. Right. So believe me, if we're going in that direction, you will be getting a call from me asking if the circumstance and the test match up well. Because I know that it can be challenging, and some of the feedback we've received from districts who've utilized it more is that it really wasn't necessarily, it didn't necessarily make the environment safer and cause some problems.
Yeah, and with the experience we have up on UW campus, with testing students 2 to 3 times a week, and the expense is pretty astronomical. So, but yeah, if there's interest, there might be some things I can do as well in terms of getting supplies in kind. So,
thank you.
If that's an interest, let me know.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Good. Eric, let's hear from you if we can, and then Becky.
Yeah, so I just wanted to take a few moments just to brief everyone on like the current situation with SARS-CoV-2 activity. So, as you know, Dane County is at pretty much a historic low. I think we're below 2% positivity rate, which is excellent. That compares to the statewide, we're at about 5.9%. However, we are seeing increasing activity with the UK variant virus. So we are up to five cases in Wisconsin so far. However, they're in a lot of states, they're seeing a lot more activity. So we're expecting that the variant is going to be a predominant virus soon. And of course, because it is more transmissible. So that's where the double masking idea was brought upon is there additional mitigation measures that can be implemented that can perhaps protect people that have no immunity yet. So that's where that comes from. So it's not an official recommendation from CDC yet, but I know that there is a lot of discussion ongoing about that. So
thank you.
That's all I have. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Becky, and then we'll go to Aaron.
I don't really have much else to add, except I think I was thinking of one question for the district. And I didn't know what the policy is right now for a student who has tested positive for COVID in the past. Like if they become ill with a symptom, what is like are they required to get I guess my question is, are they required to be tested again? I know at the hospital, we are not testing these people if they were positive within a certain amount of time. So I didn't know if that's what's being required in the school district or That was my only question after.
Sure. And I'll defer to Raven. Raven would be our expert in the meeting on that. Do you mind answering that one, Raven?
Yeah, so if they're within the 90 days, as long as they haven't been a close contact of a positive case, if they're just showing symptoms, if they're within that 90-day period from their last positive case, we're not requiring them to get a test. We're just having them stay home until they're feeling better. And then when symptoms improve, they're able to return. We have had times where it's like really close to that 90 days. And then we just ask that they follow up with their physician and have them write a note just to be extra cautious.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Erin and then Katie.
And I have a consideration that actually in kind of listening to everything and kind of looking at my own kids' schedule and everything, it didn't even hit me until clients and my own children gave me this feedback. Kids are really, really excited and anxious to go back to school. And then as the older grades are going back to school, it's almost like it's two first days of school, because when they go back on one day, it's a set of classes. And when they go back the other day, it's a whole nother set of classes. So that heightened anxiety for that first day of school kind of maintained throughout the week. So then just a consideration that it may take a little bit longer for them to transition back into school, just because each time they are physically in school, they are in different classes.
Yeah.
Cool. Great point. Thank you. Good. Sorry, Katie, and then Beth.
I know Katie was working a little late tonight, so she might not have been able to join us yet. So
Okay.
we can move on.
Okay, great. Sorry. Beth and then Alice.
Hi, this is Beth. So thanks for all the updates. It's really exciting to hear that the kids are back in school and to hear all the updates from a parent who's at home and working in the hospital. As everybody knows, our goal is not only to get the kids in school, but keep them in school. So I'm always trying to think as to, what do we do if, let's say, our numbers increase again, or what can we do further that we're not doing today?
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to throw a consideration out there for in the future. If our numbers did increase, and I was listening to Jason speak about, generally things are going okay, except for the hallways. I'm just wondering if we needed to in the future to cohort the kids that have classes together and have the teachers move around to different classrooms rather than the kids. And then that way you're not having multiple people throughout the day in each classroom. It's probably a scheduling nightmare, but just kind of wanted to throw it out there for maybe in the future, if the cases did rise, it might be an opportunity.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Beth. Alice, and then let's go to Amy.
I don't have much either. It sounds really exciting. I wanted to follow up though on what Shelley mentioned about serving teachers. It's surely a very stressful time to be a teacher right now. I teach at the UW, and one thing that our director has done, there's just an ongoing open Qualtrics survey available, one for students and one for faculty. And so that would just be an option, not a one-time survey, but just something that's open and available if people have concerns that they don't feel comfortable, addressing in a different way. But that's all.
Qualtrics, so that's good to know. Okay.
Yeah. Great suggestion. Thank you. Amy, and then Matt.
Yeah, as many of you know, I work in the middle school and high school, and I just want to echo what both Jim and Jason shared earlier. At the high school, there's this excitement. I was also able to monitor a study hall in the Commons, and students learn pretty quickly about expectations. And I think also the amount of work that went into our connections lessons the week before school by other students was really powerful. And I think, again, just that pre-teaching, that reteaching is super helpful. And I agree with what was just said too. Like, it's going to take longer for our students to adjust because they are only in the building and it's really a couple hours a week of those 2 days. So I think, staff, we have grace with them and we're patient with them. But yeah, I just think it's awesome to see the students back. So just reaction.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Amy. Matt, anything else you'd like to offer?
Yeah, I have a quick question. We talked in previous meetings about staffing after vaccination being a worry that we have. And
Yeah.
Leslie, I think you said everybody who's eligible has been vaccinated at this point. Is there any
For
data?
everybody in Tier 1A, yeah.
Do we have
And
any data yet to know if this is going to be a problem? Are we worried?
Oh no,
Didn't have a lot of
it
people
will be a problem. So what we know from our Tier 1A staff is that we had a couple of challenging days when people got their second vaccination and weren't feeling well enough the next day to come in. So that's absolutely something that we're talking about when we get to the majority of our staff who are in 1B is the timing of that second vaccination. And do we do it when we know people won't have to report to work the next day? Because the numbers that we saw, we wouldn't be able to hold in-person instruction with that level of teachers out.
Okay. Okay with that, Matt? Got it. All right. So, Leslie, we need to move on to the next question. And we had great input, but we're 15-ish minutes behind where we hoped we would be. So,
Well, that's okay because the next part is rather quick, and then I can ask people what they're thinking or what considerations they have. So, as you remember, I shared with you the demographic breakdown of families selecting phased restart and selecting Oregon Online, and that we were very curious related to the fact that some of the groups within our district are disproportionately represented in Oregon Online, and we wanted to know why. So we knew that we had given out enough surveys and that it was really time to have conversations. So we call them informative interviews, but really what they are really nice conversations between either the principal and one of the adults in the family, or a couple of times it's also been someone from the student services staff. Because, you know, if you already have a really positive relationship, then it might be good to have a good conversation and build on that. So as of last week, we had 56 interviews done. We have a few more. I reread all of the responses today because we have one giant spreadsheet where every principal is entering in the results of the conversation. And basically we're asking people, you know, what made you decide to choose Oregon Online? And we will ask the same of phased restart. We're just starting in Oregon Online, and then we'll repeat the process with phased restart families. What made you choose it? What are some suggestions related to how we can make the learning experiences better for your student? And oh gosh, there's one more. There was a feedback, and then gosh, I don't remember. Jim, Jason, Katie, I know you've all done them. I'm forgetting the third question. But here's the interesting thing. What we found is that when people are answering the question about why you made the choice, the answers are extraordinarily varied. It's very difficult to pull out a theme because it's very dependent on the family and the family circumstances. For instance, there were a couple of families who had children in multiple grades, multiple schools, and they were picking the mode that was best suited to the child. So one family might have children in Oregon Online and in phased restart. But what we're noticing is that a lot of the families just have general concerns about the pandemic, and they're saying, a couple of them said very clearly, they don't think anybody should be in school right now. And some said we will send them back when they have the vaccine. So a lot of the concerns were pandemic related. Quite a few of them were related to high-risk health conditions of either the student or a family member. And there were a couple that were related to grandparents and grandparents' care. That right now the grandparents were the primary caregivers when one of the other family members was at work, and they didn't want their child to go into school and potentially put grandparents at risk. Logistics were a big piece oftentimes. And then another common theme is that some families said their students were just doing better online, and they wanted to keep that going. So it was very challenging to pull out themes other than what I just shared because the circumstances were just really individual. Families are trying to make the best decisions they can in the oddest circumstance that most of us have lived through. So what we wanted to do is try to find themes and use those themes to further improve our educational model. And I think we'll be able to over the long haul. I just wanted to share with you what we were learning so far. So for those of you who have done some of the interviews or had the conversations, is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, any reactions, questions, thoughts, and we'll just open it up for anybody who'd like to contribute.
Leslie, I mean, you're dead on that. It varied amazingly. I think in general, online has worked for a good number of our families, and especially with the older kids, there are some students who have enjoyed the flexibility in the schedule and have taken on work obligations that, as we begin to phase back, have caused them some stress and anxiety to have to disrupt their new routines as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Jim.
I think one of the things I'll just mention, I think, I can see that it's hard to find themes. I think the numbers, though, are pretty different, right? When we look, especially based on race. So I think, and then also, this group worked really hard. And I think all along we've been saying the best thing is for kids to be back in school. So I think one of the questions I'd like us all to be thinking about is, I think you guys have done a remarkable job of making online work, right? But so if we know that there's a disproportionate number of Black and brown kids who are staying home, how are we making sure that we're not creating further gaps in their learning? And what are we doing to support them and their families?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Great point and question. Thank you, Shelley. Others?
I guess I would just add to Shelley's point is, I don't know if you're finding out in the interviews, but there also may be some mental health issues associated with the child wanting to be back in school, but the family circumstance doesn't allow that, and the fear of missing out and investigating that, and which further impacts their ability to learn and have an educational experience that works for them. And so if we're having those kind of questions being asked, if you're talking with a parent, is there a conversation happening with a student about, and maybe that's different. And I know you're looking at that, parent or family member versus student, but then all looking as we head into summer school or transition to fall, that's another, a time to really look at where are the gaps, and emotionally as well as educationally.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Krista.
I wonder, and Shelley, I'd love your take on this. Like, how many, there was the kids doing better online, and then parentheses, less drama. I just wonder how many kids if the kids are getting bullied because they're Black or Hispanic, or if there's interpersonal tension with other kids in the schools. That struck me. Okay, what if there's something, there's a microaggression going on under there? Shelley, what's your thought?
Well, I think we know that microaggressions happen to all of our kids, all of our Black and brown kids, all of the time. They happen to all of our marginalized populations. I think the thing that I have no idea, but I would guess that because we're seeing in the population, right, Black and brown families are being disproportionately affected by COVID. They are more likely to be essential workers, more likely to get sick, more likely to know somebody who has died. So I think if you all are hearing kind of the theme that concerns of the pandemic are really what are affecting those families. I mean, I think my hunch is it's that, right? That, but
Or it's a multi-generational household with someone who is at risk within the household, which, you know, oftentimes we can tie back to some institutional racism then too, right? Like, so there's pieces of that woven throughout all of it. Absolutely. But honestly, I don't know if we're going to really get to the idea of, are some kids finding it to be more peaceful because of lack of bullying or lack of microaggressions? I think we're much more likely to get that out of our conversations with our students than our conversations with our parents. Although certainly some of them may know, and that less drama, I think it only came up in 2 comments, but it stuck with us, so that's why it's on the screen. But I really think that's the type of information that we'll be able to get from our students much better, I think, than from our parents.
Yeah, thank you. Alice, do you have something to ask?
I had a question. One theme we can see in these slides is, of course, the racial theme that, you know, percentage-wise, there's a greater or a disproportionate percentage of families choosing the Oregon Online. So of those 50-some families that were interviewed, do we know the demographics of those families?
We do, yeah.
And that's representative of
Yes.
the Oregon Online.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I think right now if we were to break down all 56 and into demographic categories, I'd say we've done a good portion of those have been our families whose first language is Spanish. Because a lot of the interviews were done by our Spanish translator because she has such a good relationship with the families. And also it allows them to speak in a language they may feel more comfortable in and have, you know, a generally more comfortable conversation. So I'd say probably 20% of what you're seeing on the screen is coming directly from that group of students or that group of families.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions or reactions you'd like to share before we transition?
Yeah, quick question. I know that superintendents speak to each other. Do you have similar information from other surrounding districts? Are they doing some similar qualitative assessments?
I'm sure they are because the data tends to break down in a very similar way across the county. Yeah. I would love to find out bigger picture, right? Like the experiences of our families across the county. And honestly, that's probably a topic for our Dane County Equity Consortium because that is a group of different administrators from all of the school districts in the area and beyond Dane County. It's expanded so that it's a good portion of southern Wisconsin is getting together to actually create a dashboard that includes multiple districts so that we can look at things on broader themes as opposed to really small populations in some of the suburban districts. So small that oftentimes the WISE dash information coming from the state won't disaggregate because it's identifiable.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, we should probably transition and talk about how the committee's going to be moving forward.
All right, so we'll go to the next one. What I would like to suggest to the group is that we don't meet on March 1st and we resume on March 15th. And that is just to say that as we're moving through the first couple of months of our times meeting together, the changes were coming at a very rapid fire pace. And we had all of our phase-ins and we needed so much input from all of you. But I think that we are yet going to go through more changes this school year. So we know that this is not done. There is more to come. But we probably are going to have a quieter period for a couple of weeks. And so we thought maybe we would skip one meeting and resume again in mid-March. But I'm open to your thoughts and suggestions on that.
Thumbs up if it makes sense, down if you disagree, this if you're, where are you? So Leslie is predicting not a lot of new information in the next 2 weeks. We'll see how that goes.
Yes, I could be eating my words and calling
Yeah.
an emergency meeting. Trust me.
Right. Yeah.
I just
So-
think that now we have to see what public health, if there are going to be any changes from public health based on what the CDC said, or if they're doing their own independent inquiry based on what's adequate distancing based on age group. I'm really interested in the research that's coming out on that.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm assuming people are going to be okay with having an evening other than being with us for at least 1 month. So that's Leslie's gift to us all. Thank you. If between now and then you have an observation, a concern, a suggestion as things continue to evolve, you know how to get a hold of Leslie.
Oh, please do. Your input's always welcomed and appreciated. So thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
So
look at us, Drew. 7:15.
a miracle.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, everybody.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Mhm.